Hello and welcome to another edition of the Iain Dale All Talk podcast. I'm Iain Dale. Joining me today is somebody who I've got to know over the last few years on Good Morning Britain, Ben Shephard, who I see from his Wikipedia page is a champion tosser.
Can't believe that was the first thing you noticed. Actually, I can believe that was the first thing you noticed.
And the fact that you've got one of your middle names is Sherrington.
Sherrington, yeah.
That's a bit posh, isn't it?
Very posh. It's not. It was my grandmother's maiden name.
Right.
Very working class family from the Midlands, and so my brother has it. I've got it. My two boys have got it now as well. So it's,
you inflicted it on them.
Yeah, quite. Because of course, when I was going through school, Keeping Up Appearances was up, and she named her son Sheridan, I think, or something like that. So all I got with grief was that my parents were sort of super posh.
I have to say, my middle name is Campbell, and all of the first sons down the generations are always called Campbell. So of course I was Campbell Soup at school, obviously.
Yeah. But I do now, as a grown adult with children, I love the fact that I've got my grandmother's maiden name within my name, but it very rarely gets used. We're all shepherds, really.
We should explain that you're a champion pancake tosser. In fact, you held the world record for pancake tossing for the whole of one day.
One day. It was particularly spectacular, though. I don't know if you know how many tosses I managed in a minute.
No, I don't.
118.
That's quite a lot. That's two a second.
Yes, Iain Dale, yes. This is the technique that I was able to display. My tossing was second to none at the time. Unfortunately, Aldo Zilli, another one of your looky-likes, is a bigger tosser than me. And Aldo took it, I think he got it the next day. So it didn't last very long, but one that I'm still very proud to hold.
See, the thing about you and me is we have the same sense of humour, don't we, basically? And if either one of us says something that is even the remotest kind of double entendre on Good Morning Britain, the other one just looks, with that look, and we try not to corpse.
I don't know what you mean, Iain Dale. That would never be me. I'm far too professional. I just know it's you and Jackie as you come in and your particular brand of, for the many, humour that seeps in many ways.
It does a little bit.
Onto the desk. Yeah. Brilliantly so.
Now, we'll talk about your career a little bit later, but I want to talk about the book that you've brought out. It's called Humble Heroes, Inspirational Stories of Hope, Heart and Humanity. And this really all stems from the charitable work that you do for Pride of Britain and the fact you're a judge on Pride of Britain. And I was reading the introduction, and the way you describe some of the heroic things that people do, and also there's one person, unfortunately I can't remember which one it was now, one person who's whispered to you on stage when you were presenting the awards that I feel a complete fraud. And I wonder whether that's actually quite a common thing, not just in these awards, but every award, where somebody wins something and they kind of feel as if somebody else should have won it. I
think it's very rare, isn't it, that particularly in this world, that the people being nominated, being recognised, ever are doing it. Their endeavours and their commitment and whatever it is they're trying to achieve is never done for recognition, for personal recognition and glory. And that's certainly the case. I found it over and over again, the very nature of Humble Heroes. And this whole book came about because certainly during the pandemic, everything was looking very bleak. And we were having a lot of bad news, and I found myself being drawn towards much more positive stories. I needed that. I needed to feed part of me that sort of held on to a bit of hope that things were going to improve. And the humble heroes I was able to meet and interview and have put in the book just show you sort of relentlessly that there is the good in human nature, that there are great people out there doing brilliant things. We just don't focus on them enough. And it's a really wonderful opportunity for me to share some of their stories. It's really interesting but that use of the word fraud, you interview someone. I was listening to your interview with John Stapleton very recently, and he was saying, at some point someone's going to find us out. Yeah. That sort of imposter syndrome, whether it's broadcasting like we do, or whether it's huge sort of charitable endeavours or physical challenges. Often people think, I'm only here because people don't realise that I shouldn't be here. It's a trait. It's an interesting trait, isn't it? I wonder what it says. Maybe that's the thing that keeps us striving forward and never resting on your laurels, never getting carried away and thinking,
well, you haven't been found out in 25 years, have you? I've lasted, I think, 13, and I haven't been yet found out, but the day will come.
Well, it certainly feels like that. And I think I would never, and I think the point that we're making is these people don't get complacent. And complacency is what leads to that sort of thing. So, they're constantly pushing themselves forward, constantly challenging themselves. because they know it makes a difference to them, but also the impact it has on other people is huge.
And I think what you just said about positivity is important, because there's that old phrase, bad news is news, good news is advertising. And I think sometimes a lot of news programmes lose sight of the fact that people do want some positivity, some good news. And I think that's why Good Morning Britain really does well, because there's always something that people can latch onto and think, oh, that's not gloom and doom. And yet you look at general news programmes, the sort of half-hour long ones, and it is literally a diet of bad news. And you think, come on, we need to lighten up here sometimes.
I think what we want always is to be able to inform and entertain and distract people first thing in the morning. You know, it's a very intimate time of the day to be broadcasting when it's that early. Often we're the first people that when you wake up in the morning, you hear on the television, TV goes on, people don't necessarily talk. So you want to share the important stories of the day, but life isn't just all about bad news stories or serious news stories. Life is about being able to talk with somebody at work over the photocopier or over the kettle about what you saw on TV last night, or something that's gone viral, or the latest lineup in I'm a Celebrity. And we want to be able to share that and reflect that conversation. And wouldn't life be very dull and dark if there wasn't those moments of light and hope? And I think they're the things that get us through. They're the things that I certainly gravitate towards. In, I don't know about you, if ever I feel like I'm sort of overloaded with seriousness and what's going on, I will try and push myself towards those things, a bit of levity, because we all need a bit of levity in our lives.
Whereas
we all need
I just
a laugh.
go and watch Margaret Thatcher speeches on YouTube.
I'm feeling inspired. But I mean, I think that you and Jackie get what you get so brilliantly right on your For the Many podcast is it is a serious political podcast with really serious issues. But the chemistry and the joy that you share in discussing those issues means that you can have differing opinions and you can enjoy the debate that goes with it, and you can laugh about it at the same time. You can take the mickey out of each other.
So I used to think it was actually quite difficult to translate that into mainstream media, but in a way, I'd hope we do that on Good Morning Britain every Friday. I mean, okay, it's a sort of slightly toned-down version, but it shows that people with differing political viewpoints can get on without falling out. And we've done, 360 episodes of that, and I don't think we've actually had a real crossword in the whole lot.
It's as you will know, because you know you broadcast every night on your radio show, it's quite febrile out there and very divisive. And I think there's a lot of people wanting to shout at each other because they don't agree, rather than have a listen, concede that some of their points might be interesting, some of your points are interesting. We don't have to agree for this to conclude the conversation. Let's just use that to inform us going forward. And you're absolutely right. When we do the news panel that you and Jackie come in on, we want to talk about the main news of the day, because that's what people are going to be talking about, whether that's politics or business or the war in Ukraine or whatever that means. But there will undoubtedly there'll be other things that you and Jackie will be able to comment on that will make us laugh, that we can enjoy, that we can share. And that might be a sort of a serious news story with a funny sort of tone to it or something like that. And that is what life is. Life isn't just one long, serious news story, is it? It's absolutely a lot of moments of different sort of senses of energy and humour.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the people that you write about in the book. Let's start with Errol McKellar. It's a fascinating story, this.
So Errol is one of my humble heroes, because he is somebody, and actually this is something that I've experienced myself through my father. It started with his problem with snoring. His wife was getting so sick of him snoring, she sent him to the doctors to try and do something about his snoring. And he saw a leaflet where he could have a blood test to test his prostate, to see where he is with his prostate. And it was just a really quick blood test that he did because he happened to be in the doctor's surgery, because his wife said, for heaven's sake, sort yourself out. Like often is the case, sadly, men need to be kicked up the arse to go to see the doctor to try and get things sorted. What Errol discovered was that he had cancer. He had prostate cancer, very serious, advanced condition of prostate cancer. And he needed to do something about it. There's a lovely line that his wife turned around to him, because he really did. That's when you need support for your friends and family. But he said, his wife turned around and said, look, the cancer's knocked you down, but it hasn't knocked you out. We're going to fight this, and everyone's going to fight it with you. And Errol sort of managed to turn himself around, got his treatment, was able to go into remission. And he's a car mechanic. And he eventually went back to work. And this guy came in to have his car fixed. And he'd come in to have the car looked over. And Errol just happened to say to him, when was the last time you had your prostate checked? To this bloke who looked at him and said, what's that got to do with my gearbox? And he said, well, let me just tell you what's gone on with me. And the bloke's gone, oh, no, I'm not sure I have. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you go and get your prostate checked while I sort your car out, I'll give you a 20% reduction on the costs. And this bloke's face lit up and said, yeah, brilliant, fantastic. He disappears away. Errol's thinking, oh, crikey, this is going to cost me a fortune. The guy comes back a few days later and says, I went and got it done. And Errol's thinking, oh, it's cost me 200 quid. He said, no, don't worry about the costs. Have a look at this bit of paper. And this guy that he had suggested to go and get checked had 25% cancer of the prostate because Errol had sent him to get checked. Now, the guy went and got the treatment he needed and is perfectly healthy now. But had Errol not said to him, go and get yourself sorted, he wouldn't have done it. So that suddenly flicked a light switch in Errol's world where he started offering the people that were coming into his car mechanic shop discounts on getting themselves sorted. And the idea of MOT yourself. We MOT our cars. We look after those sorts of things. Every year we're really careful with it, but we don't necessarily do it to ourselves.
I've done phone-ins over the years on prostate cancer and bowel cancer. I mean, not cheerful subjects to do phone-ins on. And you hear the most amazing stories. And I probably had, over the years, probably a dozen people email me and say, if I hadn't been listening to your programme, I wouldn't have got checked out and I wouldn't be here today.
Absolutely.
So that to me is public service broadcasting.
And the most important part of the story that you're sharing is that it's going to inspire somebody to go, well, maybe I should check that out. I think thousands of people have had this done now. 48 men have come back having tested positive. Sadly, 2 have lost their lives. But those other 46 people who he inspired to go and get checked out because of his MOT.
But why is it that men, I think it is in particular men, are reluctant to do. I mean, as you know, I turned 60 in July, and sort of a couple of weeks before that, I got the bowel cancer test from the NHS.
Right.
So I was thinking, oh, great, the system works. And that little package has been sitting on my bedside table for, well, I have done it now, but it's taken me 3 months to do it, which is so stupid, isn't it?
But 3 months to do it because you kept putting it off. You were
because whenever I thought about it, I didn't want to have a poo.
Yes, you got to be able to deliver when you need to. But the interesting thing is, it's because I think about, it's not because I don't want to do it, and not because I'm worried about doing it. Other things get in the way. I think we can be inherently a sort of prioritise other stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas I know that Annie, particularly my wife, is so rigorous with any sort of health issue for her or the boys as well. And as a result, me too. But I think we can be, you end up going to the doctor with a shopping list of issues, don't you? Because when you eventually get round to sitting down with your GP, oh, right, by the way, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. Great. Okay, let's sort them out. Yeah. But we just need to be a little bit more efficient. And I love, the lovely thing about Errol is that this has become his life now, sort of trying to help people understand that a quick blood test, your quick test into your little thing when you're ready will make all the difference. Because as soon as you find out the result of that, if something is wrong, the sooner you catch it, the better it is, the better results in terms of sort of getting past it.
And his snoring?
His snoring is resolved. He does have to wear a contraption at night, which makes him look a bit like Darth Vader.
See, I couldn't do that. I mean, I'm a terrible snorer, apparently. But it's not that kind of snore. It's sleep apnea type snore. Horrible sound. And it frightens people.
But what does John say? Is he...
We don't sleep in the same room.
Well, then it's not a problem then, is it? If you're not sleeping next to someone, it doesn't matter, Iain.
No, I suppose not. But it's... I just know that I do it.
Does it wake you up?
No. Well, I don't think it's... Well, actually, I say that. I do wake up during the night, so maybe it is that's causing me to wake up. But, the dogs sleep on the bed, so maybe it wakes them up.
The dogs share your bed.
They do.
Not your partner.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. That's how it should be.
Yeah, probably. But he's great, and I urge anybody listening, like you saying, if you're, and I thought, when you very kindly invited me on, I thought, who would be the best stories to share? And I thought Errol would be brilliant with regards to the people that listen to this podcast. Because my dad, I sat down in the pub with a few of my mates when I was probably about 10 years ago. So I was mid-30s, and my dad would have been sort of mid-60s at the time. And I sat down with 4 mates, and one of them said, oh, you wouldn't believe this, my dad's just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And then 3 of us around the table, there are 4 of us, 3 of us said, so is mine, and so is mine. And all of our dads at the same time had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, sort of at their mid to late 50s, early 60s. Now, all three of them were absolutely fine, got treated in different ways and got through it because they got the early diagnosis. But it's something that's so crucial.
I can remember when I was 40 having a medical, I was in Bupa, so I thought, well, 40 is a good age to do it. So I went along and had all of these different tests, and then it came to the prostate bit, and the guy said, well, you don't really need to have this until you're 60, so you don't want to do this, do you? And of course, like an idiot, I said no. And you think, well, I mean, I think it costs like 350 quid.
Yeah.
Well, why would he even give you the option of...
That's weird, isn't it?
Because I mean,
I don't know if they would do that now.
I hope not.
I mean, that was a few years ago.
It was a few years ago, yeah.
And maybe they would
be... my life ago, thank you, yeah.
But maybe they would be more rigorous, literally.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing, though, because actually going and doing those things, you want to make it as quick and painless as possible. And that's a moment that's quite uncomfortable, obviously. So if someone says, oh, no, it's all right, we don't really need to do that, you go, great, fine.
Exactly.
You're the doctor, you know best.
Yeah. And that was my attitude, I suppose.
Yeah.
When you're on the stage handing out these awards and you're having to, I mean, you are the host, your job is, you're doing a professional job. Have you ever come close to losing it? Because it is a very emotional thing, these kinds of ceremonies.
So the start of the book. So I'm on the judging panel with Pride of Britain, and we give away an award for Good Morning Britain, the Young Fundraiser of the Year, which we've just done for the most recent Pride of Britain. But I also host the Pride of Sport. And the Pride of Sport is something, as you know, Iain, is something that's so close to my heart. I love football and West Ham, which is what we bond over regularly. But whatever the sport is, I absolutely adore it. And watching these people come up, whatever they may have done, that's when I get closest to tears, when I see sporting endeavour, sporting triumph, sporting resilience, because in me, that's the thing that I always aspire to. Sort of growing up, I always wanted to be a professional sportsman of some sort. And now I look at it, if I see, the thing that gets me now is that if I see children and parents working together to try and do something, because I'm a father as well, and that's when I can get very, very emotional, because you realise the commitment, the dedication and the hard work and the relentless, endless sort of endeavour that has gone into many of these people succeeding, whatever that challenge might be. I know we're going to talk about Josh in a moment, but Josh is a great example of that. It's despite all the odds, they have beaten those odds over and over and over again and continue to beat the odds to try and achieve something, to prove to other people that just because there are restrictions on you, which might be health restrictions or they might be living restrictions, whatever, you can achieve whatever you put your mind to.
Well, let's talk about Josh Llewellyn-Jones.
So Josh is somebody I first met when he was about 17, which I think was about 20 years ago. And Josh has cystic fibrosis, which is a condition that affects your lungs and your digestive system, all the major organs, covers it in a sticky mucus. And at a very early age, he was born with the distended bowel, given 10% chance of living, got through the night, survived that. Then they became apparent that he had cystic fibrosis. And cystic fibrosis, when he was born in the late 80s, had a life expectancy of about 30. I've done a lot of work with the CF Trust over the years, and that life expectancy has changed dramatically because of the advances that they've made in all sorts of treatments that they have, new medication and also awareness. Josh's family found this doctor in America who basically said, here's my advice to you, is run Josh, run him again, throw him in the pool, make him swim, then run again. And when he's really, really tired, make him run again. And they had this attitude, and Josh's big Welsh rugby family, that exercise, being outside, he had two big brothers, the more exercise he did, the better it would be for him. So his parents, despite the fact he had to take 60 tablets a day, because they have to take tablets for digestion, up to 60, tablets to aid digestion, to help with saliva, in order to be able to take their food and consume any sort of product at all. And that means that breathing is hard. It means that exercise is really difficult. Josh was never allowed to rest on his laurels, not least because he was competing with his big brothers, and he had this big Welsh burly dad who was going, come on, off you go and get stuck in. So he went to school, and he used to hide his tablets from his schoolmates because he was really embarrassed about being different, to the point that one day one of his schoolmates saw Josh had a tablet, and they said, what's that? And he's got big brothers, and he said, oh, it's cocaine. And he was 11 at the time. And that would be fine because he thought he was trying to show off, until it got back to his parents that your son's been bringing cocaine to school at primary school. And of course it wasn't. They were his digestion tablets. And then it sort of move on from that. And Josh really started excelling in sport despite his cystic fibrosis. He was cross-country champion. He was playing rugby at a really high level. He was playing football at a really high level, constantly driven by his parents. And this innate sort of sense in himself, which he was not going to let this condition beat him. It wasn't going to stop him being who he wanted to be.
Because it's invisible. I mean, you wouldn't know someone had it, would you?
Absolutely.
I remember my best friend in America, Daniel, his nephew, I think, he came over to this country with his mother, and they were desperate to go and see West Ham because I'd taken Daniel when he was over here in the 1990s. And I remember thinking at the time, I mean, I don't know that I'd ever met anyone with cystic fibrosis before, but I thought, well, how do you tell?
Yeah.
You can't.
No, you can't. And often people with cystic fibrosis look absolutely fine as well. They'll be slim, they'll be sort of well built. Josh is a great example of that. And they aren't overweight, and they lead busy lives, but they have this underlying health condition, which means they end up taking tons and tons of tablets just to metabolize, just to be able to break down their food, just to be able to live. It's interesting because at one point Josh was about 16 and he kept winning the school cross country, and one of his classmates said to his teacher, "It's not fair that Josh runs in our race." And she said, "Why?" "Well, because he's got cystic fibrosis and that gives him an unfair advantage." And he'd been able to persuade, they'd sort of come up, this cystic fibrosis was sort of a superpower. It made him even fitter and stronger. But that was his mental strength. Cut to years later, and he's been through all sorts of health scares. But he keeps setting himself these remarkable challenges. I'll read you one of the challenges that he did. This is sort of sets him apart slightly. He wanted to do something to show the CF community that having CF shouldn't restrict what you do. So he found this World's Fittest Man challenge. This is the sort of thing that you'd like to do on a weekend, Iain, I'm sure. So what it involved is lifting 100 tons, cycling 100 miles, running 10 miles, rowing 10 miles, cross-training 10 miles, swimming 2 miles, 3,000 sit-ups, 1,000 press-ups, and 1,000 squats in 24 hours.
Madness.
All of that in 24 hours. Now, he loves a physical challenge, but physical challenge when you've got something like CF, which restricts your breathing and your fitness, is another thing. And the reason he wanted to do it was because he felt like he wants to show the cystic fibrosis community that just because you've got CF doesn't mean you have to stop yourself from pushing in any way, shape or form. So he's done these amazing challenges over the years.
He actually completed that.
He completed it. He completed it. He's gone on to do other things. He's lifted 1 million kilos in 24 hours. I mean, he has this mental strength that is remarkable.
You've done something, I mean, okay, not quite like that. But I mean, didn't you do 7 marathons in 7 days?
Yeah. In fact, I
can't imagine how it's possible to do that.
One of my other humble heroes in the book, Ivan Hollingsworth, I ran with him because his son had open heart surgery and he wanted to raise money for the Children's Heart Unit at the Freeman. It's amazing what you can do mentally when you've got a reason to do it. And this is Josh's point. Gives him a reason which he wants to show this community. And the thing that he's done, which is incredible, is he's created this thing called CF Warriors, which is a community for children with CF around the world. Because one of the heartbreaking things about CF is that cystic fibrosis as a condition isolates you from other people, but it also isolates you from other children with cystic fibrosis because of cross-infection. So the one thing that would connect you to someone means you can't be with them. But because he's created CF Warriors, which is a community around the world globally, these kids are all connecting, sharing their physical challenges that they're doing and going out there and doing their best to not only live with the condition, but thrive with the condition as well. I mean, he's just an extraordinary human being and has that, it's the driving factor. And if you know you've got to get, people will often say to me, how do you on earth do you get up first thing in the morning? Because I have to, I've got a reason to get up first thing in the morning. If you give someone purpose, it's amazing what they can achieve.
But you've been getting up in the morning for many, many, many years, haven't you? So has my colleague Nick Ferrari. How come he looks like he does and you look like you do?
I think he does at least 5 days a week as well.
He does,
on the radio. That's the thing. All my radio presenter friends are like, why is it the TV broadcasters in the breakfast show never have to do 5 days a week and the radio you boys do and girls do? I don't know what the answer is to that, but I'd give his paper rounds a lot heavier than mine. I think that's fair.
I mean, we'll talk about that a bit later. But let's talk about the third person that you've chosen from the book. I mean, we could talk about everybody, but nobody would want to buy the book, so let's not. Let's talk about Craig Jones, because this is an amazing story.
So Craig Jones was the first openly gay officer in the Navy, and a young man who grew up on the South Coast, had frigates on his wall as a boy growing up, like I had sort of West Ham strikers, McAvenny and Cotty and all that sort of. He had frigates and boats and submarines. All he ever wanted to do was join the Navy. When he was old enough at 17, he went to recruitment, didn't get in. They said, "You're not quite ready yet, Mr. Jones, come back." Joined at 20. It was the one thing he'd always wanted to do. Got the career of his dreams, joining the Navy at 20 years old. Started as a sailor in the Navy, and was on this career path in a world that he had only dreamt about, and was finally there, and he was absolutely loving it. Interestingly, and I think this is an interesting sort of part of who he is and the conversation about Craig. He said he was about 21 and he was walking home and he went past newsagents and he saw a copy of the Radio Times. Said, "Oh, that looks good." Went and got the Radio Times, got it home, and it had Michael Ball on the front. And he realised he'd bought the Radio Times because it has Michael Ball on the front, and he fancied Michael Ball. And in that instant, he went, "That must mean that I'm gay." Now, at that stage in his life, he had not dwelt on his sexuality. When we talked about it, he said there was no reason for him to believe that he was gay at that stage, but this was the first tangible sign to him, quite late on, I should imagine, and maybe you can talk more about that, but for him to realise that, oh my goodness, because the reason that was important was because homosexuality was illegal in the military until the year 2000.
Yeah.
So this was the early 90s, and all of a sudden he's realised this dream job that he had, that he'd only ever wanted to do, that he'd finally achieved, was massively under threat because of his sexuality. And the fascinating thing about his journey through the Navy and what eventually he managed to help change, there's a few moments through his career. In the mid-90s, he was serving in Northern Ireland. He basically decided to leave his sexuality at the door. So every time he went onto base, every time he went near the ships, every time he went near any of his colleagues, it was never spoken about, and he would join in the banter that was the anti-gay sentiment that was there as well. He said he went in about 1994, he was serving in Northern Ireland, and they were on patrol, and they came across a small fishing boat that had no crew on the deck. And Craig and his colleague sort of pulled alongside. Craig lifted up the hatch to look down, and in the hull of the boat were two young boys lying each other's arms. And he instinctively felt very protective towards them because they were taking huge risk as well by being together, because that was illegal. And he was taking a huge risk because he didn't want his colleague to see. So he sort of blocked the hatch, pretended he got sort of stuck in the hatch, let the boys get dressed, came out. They were chatted to, "What's going on? Why are you here?" They were sent on their way, no problem. And he said he got back to his ship, or got back to land, and he said he felt a huge amount of shame that these two young men had the courage to be with each other, to be together, albeit in hiding on the ship, and he couldn't address his own sexuality for fear of what that meant for his career and what his colleagues would say. Charting his journey through the rest of the 90s and horrendous moments for him. There was a point where, and you may well remember this, in the late 90s, and I just wrote this down because I wanted to make sure that I got it right, that there was a letter in the Daily Mail that was printed by the first Sea Lord at the time. And in this letter, this open letter that was printed, and I found this, at the time I was at university, early 90s, I was at university, I was doing a dance and drama degree. In my naivety, people's sexuality was neither here and there. I was surrounded by people from all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds.
And doing that degree, everyone assumed you were gay anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the wonderful thing. It didn't bother me for a moment. Yeah. I loved it. I loved the fact that I had me and 16 girls and I could play rugby and I could there was no concern, and it was never an issue for me. And yet here was this guy doing this dream job in the military that couldn't be himself. And the first Sea Lord wrote an open letter in the Daily Mail saying that he hoped he would never have to serve with queers and lesbians. That was in the letter. And Craig said, and he describes it in the book as his Judas moment, he said to all of his colleagues around there, "I hope I never have to serve with them too." Because he was so concerned. He said what would happen is people would disappear on the weekend and they wouldn't come back. If anyone had found out, he would have been dishonourably discharged. He would have had his medals unceremoniously ripped from his uniform. It was fear that he was living with, that people would know who he was. And as he goes on to say, the idea that gay and lesbian soldiers and sailors hadn't been in the army is absolutely preposterous. They'd been serving for 500 years alongside everybody else and doing an amazing job. It's just the army and the navy hadn't come round to the realisation that didn't make them any weaker, and they were a huge asset to both those services. So it sort of goes on from there. 2000, eventually, the ban was lifted. 2000, I mean, it's only 20 odd years ago. It's extraordinary now when you think about it.
Well, there was a stereotype, wasn't there? And I think there still is to an extent, where if you don't know anyone that's gay, you kind of automatically assume that gay men want to shag every other man that they meet. And it's just not true. It's the same for straight people as gay. There are some people you fancy, there are some people you don't. But it all goes down to the fear of sort of predatory men. And okay, and there are predatory gay men, just as there are predatory straight men.
Absolutely. Yeah, undoubtedly. And it's that lack of understanding and fear of what people sort of think they don't know. Because anybody that says, I don't know any gay people, that's not true. They will know gay people, they just might not know they're gay.
I remember when I was selected as a Conservative candidate, and this is about the same time, 2003, and I had to address the issue at the selection meeting, not for reasons which too long to go into here, but I'm nothing bad. And I remember doing my sort of political speech, and then I had teed up someone to ask a question about it, because they said, we see you're speaking at a meeting for the campaign for homosexual equality at the Conservative Party conference. Is that an issue that's important to you, Mr. Dale? Because they couldn't say, are you gay? Or they weren't allowed to. So I just got up and I'd written this sort of 2-minute tearjerker of a speech. And I said, look, everyone in this room knows someone who's gay. It could be your son, it could be your daughter, it could be your postman, it could be the refuse collector, it could be anybody. Does that affect my ability to do the job of a Member of Parliament? No, it doesn't. I would be a politician who happens to be gay, not a gay politician. And it went on. And I daren't look at anyone while I was doing that.
Really?
And at the end of it, I remember looking up and there were various people in tears. And I got 66% of the vote. And in a rural area, a Conservative area with a small c, I thought that was a real achievement because it didn't matter to them.
No.
And a few days later, after I was selected, this guy came up to me at the Conservative Party conference. He's probably only in his early 20s, and he just said, I just want to thank you. And I said, what for? And he said, because you made it easier for the rest of us. Say something.
Well, I think that's testament to your extraordinary positioning and you being brave enough to do it. Because as you say, 66%, but it took you being brave enough to stand there and say it in a language that they heard. Because up till then, it's headlines in newspapers that people don't want to work with these people, rather than, hold on, what you've said is so tangible. It could be your daughter, it could be your son, it could be your uncle, it could be your postman. And it doesn't make you any worse at your job. And you know, Craig would argue it can make you better. And he said ultimately he's not in the Navy anymore, but the Navy were the first military force to parade at Pride in uniform, and sort of moments like that along the way.
How gay is that?
Isn't it just? But to take great honour and pride that not only did they parade as the Royal Navy, but they were going to be in their uniform as well, because the Navy themselves were hugely proud to have these naval officers.
But it's like with any social reform, isn't it? That the heavens don't open. There aren't plagues of locusts.
No.
People just get on with it. It's like gay adoption or equal marriage.
Yeah.
It's actually worked. And nobody flinches now when you talk about 2 men or 2 women getting married.
No. I bore my family with this quote over and over again, but it just, every now and again, it just feels very pertinent, which is the horror of every agony is the fear of its anticipation. You know, the idea of the thing is far scarier than the reality of it.
Yeah.
And I use that regularly about, you know, if I'm standing up and I've got to do a talk, I imagine, you know, the idea of you standing up and making that statement to those constituents at that time would have been huge. And the fallout from it was wonderful because it was so affirming and they heard your message, and it was unbelievably important, not just to you, but to that community as well. You've changed the landscape there, not least because that young lad that came to you.
The problem is, though, when you become the first to do something, and I was the first to tell a selection committee before the vote that I was going, a lot of people had done it afterwards. but then you become slightly notorious, and you become known as. I mean, people always say, "Oh, I was the first gay Conservative candidate." Well, I wasn't.
No, of course
I was the first to declare it, but. And I remember the Observer did a profile of sort of people who they thought would be sort of at the top of politics in 10 years' time, and I was included in this, which I was very pleased about. But I was described as the gay Conservative. And, I mean, in a rural area like North Norfolk, I mean, it wasn't helpful.
No.
It really wasn't.
No.
And I don't blame the fact that I lost on that, but it was a contributory factor.
What you and I both know, because we work in the world of news and we work in sort of, everyone loves a label, because it's very easy to sort of delineate between people if we can say, oh, he's the gay one and he's the one that likes this and she's that one. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right. Wouldn't it be better if you were considered on your policies and your skills rather than, who you like being with?
Let's turn to one of your proudest achievements.
I'm not sure what this is going to be.
Were you watching Coronation Street when Mary basically pledged her love to you and told us all about her Ben Shephard duvet cover?
The Ben blanket. I wasn't, but my great Jan was. My great Jan, who is very famous in many ways, and she immediately phoned me up and said, "You've just been on Coronation Street. You've just been on Coronation Street." And in fact, I had heard it was happening because our mutual friend Lou, who was just here, had been talking to the writer who had said, "Oh, we've got this really fun storyline coming up." But what was extraordinary is the response was, I mean, when life crosses over into art, which is Coronation Street, when you start popping up, and I know it's the same because I know Lorraine's popped up occasionally, and Cammie's been in Emmerdale. It's a very strange sort of crossing of the streams, which they always say you shouldn't do, like in Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams, because suddenly I'm existing in a world that's make believe, that's been conjured up in the thoughts of a writer's room. And it's incredibly flattering and lovely, really lovely.
It's been an ongoing thing, hasn't it?
It has.
I can remember I was watching. Well, I don't think I was watching it live because I was watch it back at the weekend, and I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, I hope Ben's watched this."
I did, and then of course we had the clip for Good Morning Britain, and what I said then, because I was trying to get the writers of Corrie, because I think we were in the studio at the time on Tipping Point, to write an episode where Mary came in to be a contestant on Tipping Point. So we properly crossed the stream, but it wouldn't be like, it would be an episode that we actually shot, like a Corrie episode where she was actually a contestant.
Oh my God.
And then Anthony was desperate to come in, because he thought Sean should be with her as well. And so, and unfortunately, in the end, they decided that they couldn't do that because they don't like to sort of take the characters out of the studio. Funny. But an actual episode. I wanted and Patty came and did it. Lovely Patty Claire came and did it, and she brought the blanket with her, and she came and did the celebrity show. But I really wanted Mary to do an episode because I thought that would have been, it's sort of about crossing the divide, the fourth wall, breaking that. If suddenly Mary was playing Tipping Point. It's just ridiculous.
Let's talk about football a bit. I told my friend Matthew that you were going to be doing this with me today. He said, "I bet you just talk about West Ham." So let's go.
Very happy to do that.
You're a frustrated footballer, aren't you? Because you have actually played. Have you played at Upton Park?
Yeah.
At the London Stadium. But you certainly played at Old Trafford.
Yeah, I've not played at the London Stadium, actually. The last Soccer Aid was at London Stadium, and I very nearly did and because Mark Noble played in Soccer Aid as well. But I've played at a lot of the grounds now around the country. I only tend to play these days if it's sell-out, Ian. 70,000 odd at Old Trafford. It's been that of all the things.
Are you actually any good?
I like to I'm sort of an enthusiastic footballer. I play football like a rugby player. I run around with a lot of enthusiasm, not very much skill. And endeavour. I'm fit. That's the only weapon I have in my armoury. My touch is pretty poor. I've got a head the shape of a 50p, so the ball bounces off at all different angles. But I've never missed a penalty in any of the shootouts.
How many have you done?
I think 3 or 4.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Not bad. Going.
Yeah, not bad stat.
West Ham could use you at the moment. On penalties.
Crikey. And there's nothing quite like stepping up to take a penalty, even though I know it's only a TV show and I'm a TV presenter. But that pressure. And the last one I took was they did one at Stamford Bridge, and my kids were in the crowd, and they were old enough to really be aware of what was going on, and all I could think about was them. I wasn't worried about the penalty. I was worried about what was going to happen if I didn't score.
Yeah.
Anyway, fortunately, I think I was the only England player to
goalkeeper?
score. Patrick Keelty. I tend to score a lot of penalties against Patrick
I
Keelty.
score against him.
Well, I'll hold you to that. I'll tell him you said that, and let's set this up. I'd be very happy to test that theory. Paddy's a good keeper. He's a decent
Mind
keeper.
you, obviously, with my leg at the moment.
Oh,
it'd be a bit
yeah.
difficult,
Suddenly,
wouldn't
the ailments.
it? How did you come to support West Ham? Was it a family thing?
Well, I'm that side of London. I was born and brought up in Epping, so right at the end of the Central Line. All my family are actually Aston Villa fans. They're from the Midlands, but not really that much into
You've
football.
never told Jackie that, have you?
No, I keep steer clear, steer clear. But my father-in-law, my dad and my brother, but my dad and brother weren't really into football. So I went to school in Chigwell, which is sort of heartland West Ham fan belt,
Posh bit of
the
that
posh bit
area,
of that area. And my mates, if we didn't have school on a Saturday, they went to Upton Park. So they took me one Saturday to Upton Park, and as you know, you only have to go in there once to fall in love.
Well, funnily enough, that I went to my first game at Upton Park from Epping.
Did you?
Because my uncle, he used to manage the Copt Hall estate.
Yeah.
And so they had the house, you know, sort of when you turn into it off the main road,
Yeah.
they had the sort of gatehouse.
Nice.
So we used to go and visit them all the time. And we this is in
Rod Stewart, is he not? I mean, if the family's still there on the estate?
No, they live in Devon now. But
'Cause that's where Rod Stewart is now.
Yeah. Oh, actually on
the
that,
Copt Hall estate
Oh, is
now,
he? I
yeah.
didn't know that. And I remember how old was I? 13, 14, and getting the Central Line
Yeah.
and then getting off the tube station at Green Street and walking down Green Street, which in 1977, it was carnage.
Yeah, I bet.
It was a war zone.
Yeah.
And I mean, I come from Saffron Walden, so I'd never seen anything like this before. My eyes were on stalks. And it was the day Alan Kirbishley made his debut. He was seen as sort of the next Martin Peters.
Amazing.
And we lost 1-0 to Chelsea. It was standing in the lower west stand.
Yeah.
I don't think I went back probably for 3 or 4 years after that.
So who in the
I
family was a West Ham fan? Was it your
Nobody.
uncle? Oh, you just went? Did you go on your own?
When I was a child, I mean, sort of up to the age of what would have been 10, I was, being from Essex, I was a Manchester United supporter. And then they got relegated.
Oh, nightmare.
And the shame of supporting a relegated team. And my best friend, Roger Sizer, at primary school, he supported West Ham. So being easily led, I switched to West Ham, which I think as a child you're probably allowed to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that as an adult.
No.
What a great decision that turned out to be.
Yeah, and we've been relegated a few times since
Yeah,
then, and you've not changed
absolutely.
It's that much like you. My first arrival on Green Street, coming out of the station and walking down with my friends, which started at about sort of 12 or 13, and then sort of carried on through to my late teens till we could go and meet in the pub, and then we could, those things. They are memories that I cherish.
Yeah.
It was. I mentioned the word earlier, but it's febrile down there, isn't it? It was that tension, that excitement and the anxiety and the drama. Even this is before kickoff. It's very different now at London Stadium, but actually I really enjoy that process now as well. I love going to the London Stadium. I think last season was it felt like it really started feeling like home, and it had been tricky up till then. But it's getting there, and the crowds are getting bigger, and the team are playing better. I thought he's put a good squad together with some really exciting players. And it's years ago when the boys were little, Jack had football on a Saturday, and he came downstairs in his kit, and he didn't have his West Ham shirt on. I said, "Why haven't you got your West Ham shirt?" He said, "Oh, I couldn't find it." I went upstairs, and he'd hidden it under his pillow.
Oh, no.
And I've gone, "Why have you hidden this?" And he said, "All my friends teased me to become a West Ham fan. They're all Manchester City fans." It was the year we finished sixth, and Dimitri Payet was. And I said, "It's never going to be this good. It's been really bad. This is the time." Anyway, so for that rest of that season, me and Sam, his big brother, wouldn't let him support West Ham. Anyway, since that day, they both love the fact that they support West Ham now, because it feels like, it's got a bit more heart, it's a bit more belief,
That would have been terrible for you, though, if it switched.
Oh, no. Yeah, we wouldn't have let him switch. We sort of gave him a 30-minute grace period.
My dad was a Blackpool supporter because he grew. He was in his teens when Blackpool were really. Just after the war, they had Stanley Matthews,
That's right,
Stan
of course.
Mortensen,
Yeah.
and he went to I think it was the 1948 Cup final at Wembley, where they lost 4-2 to Manchester United. Or did they win? No, I think they lost. And he was just hooked on Blackpool ever since. And I took him to the 2012 playoff final.
I was going to say, did you go? Because that's one of my greatest
got
days.
a chauffeured car down from Saffron Walden, and a friend of his, also a Blackpool supporter from Essex, he came too, and a school friend of mine who's a West Ham supporter. But it was a really weird day because my mother was dying in hospital and we kept thinking, should we really go?
Right.
But she was insistent that we should. And it was like there was a role reversal where I became the parent and he became the child. We got this sort of entertainment package. And he said, well, I'm not eating that rubbish. I'll just sit there until you do. And it was just the most marvellous day, really, particularly as we won.
I mean, amazing day. I remember walking down Wembley Way with Clarence, and I'd been working at Sky since about 2010, so I'd done a few cup finals at that stage, League Cup finals. I can remember walking down Wembley Way and the colours were claret and blue. Obviously, there was some orange there for Blackpool. And the statue of Bobby Moore draped in West Ham's shirt and a West Ham scarf, and people singing Bubbles at Wembley. It was the sort of dream that I'd only ever imagined, because the FA Cup finals and the playoff finals previously had been at the Millennium Stadium.
Yeah.
So we'd not been able to be, but being at Wembley that day, and of course, we were the favourites on the day. And I've got a picture from the day at full time of the whistle, and it's one of my most cherished moments because you can't believe we've done it. And to see West Ham lift a trophy, we didn't win the that championship that year, but we lifted a trophy at Wembley. It was everything I'd hoped it would be to see your team win a match at Wembley and lift a trophy.
I felt like that at a match that we lost, the 2006 Cup final in Cardiff, where it was just the most amazing match. And I remember walking out of the stadium thinking, well, we really won that. And Liverpool fans would come and say, oh, mate, you did so well. I thought,
Steven Gerrard.
Patronising can
Those
you get?
goals.
But it was just the most, apart from the ending, the most perfect day. And I'd actually given my ticket away because a friend of mine who had been going to West Ham since 1958 hadn't got a ticket. And like a fool, I gave him mine. And I think I wrote about it somewhere, and Dennis Campbell of The Guardian, he rang me up, he said, I'm going to get you a ticket, this is the last thing I do, and he did.
Amazing. And it was remarkable, wasn't it? 2-0 up. Because I wasn't able to go because we were shooting Soccer Aid at the time.
Oh, my God.
We were shooting Soccer Aid, and they said, no, you can't, because at the time we did loads of training. So the game was coming up, and this was the Saturday before. And I was like, yeah, but I'll just go down. I'll go down to Cardiff, and I'll come back. No, if you want to play in this match at Old Trafford, then you can't do it. And of course, so I sat and I watched the game. I remember watching it with John Barnes, and I was watching it with Jamie Redknapp, and we were all watching it together. Terry Venables was our coach at the time, so that everybody was there. And West Ham went 2-0 up. And all I could think was, we're going to win the FA Cup, and I'm not there. I'm not there, albeit surrounded by some of my heroes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Steven Gerrard did what Steven Gerrard did.
I was actually sitting directly in line with the goal line when Konchesky basically crossed, and I could see it was going to go in right from the moment it left his boot. It was amazing.
Oh, man. What a moment. And we all did, didn't we? Walked away going, do you know what? At least we played well. We did our best, but that still stings. Still stings.
Your partnership with Chris Kamara, which I think is one of the all-time great sporting TV partnerships.
Thank you.
On Goals on Sunday, and it became sort of part of my life, which I mean, they don't do it anymore, unfortunately. And you're now doing a podcast with Chris, which I was listening to actually this morning on the train to the one you've done with Sean Dyche, and it kind of brings it all back because you've just got this unique relationship, and these sort of partnerships that broadcasters have are really special sometimes, aren't they? I mean, it's like you and Kate as well.
I think, and I've been incredibly lucky because when I started at Sky in 2010 and I left GMTV just as ITV took over before they launched Daybreak, and I was lucky enough to go to Sky for a few years and do some broadcasting. One of the things that the head of Sky at the time said, right, we're going to do this, and this, Ben, but I want you to do Goals on Sunday with Cammy, because he was, even then, he was, sort of an icon of Sky Sports, had a lot of credibility and respect within the world. So I was going to learn my trade with him.
Even though he did break Frank McAvenny's leg.
And now, Ian, we can have a conversation about this because I got Frank and I got TC on the show, and even Frank admitted that he didn't break his leg.
Didn't he?
He didn't break his leg.
That one.
Yeah. And if you go and watch on YouTube, the tackle is on YouTube. You can see that he didn't break his leg.
Okay, I'll take it back.
You have to let it go.
I'll take it back. More
and more West Ham fans are finally realising that he didn't break his leg. But Cammy's just the most extraordinary human being. An elite level footballer who lived his life as a footballer at 100 miles an hour, wore his heart on his sleeve. then did that in the world of broadcasting. So unique. No one did football like Cammy did football, with so much enthusiasm and passion and joy and laughter, and never took himself too seriously. There was a big thing in football, and I think sometimes football can consume itself a little bit, takes itself very seriously. But of course, you go to the football with your mates, everyone does, and laughs. They enjoy themselves. They can say silly things and take the mick out of each other. And I think that's the thing that Cammy has always done brilliantly. He's had a great sense of humour about his love of football, but also his ability to laugh at himself when he's doing that. And I have been incredibly lucky to work with him for, 12 years now, on and off. So the chance to bring the Proper Football podcast back with him has just been a joy, because it's all the best bits from Goals on Sunday, which was the chat and the interview, the career stuff. But we don't do any of the analysis, so it's not week by week alongside the Premier League or the Championship or whatever it is. So we can just really indulge. I mean, I just get to indulge my love of football and talking to Gordon Strachan or Sean Dyche or whoever it might be about their careers and what they've done. And then getting Cammy's insight as well. And I just love being around him. Going out with Cammy is like being with Justin Bieber, though, by the way. Honestly, you can't go down the street without people stopping him. He has a bit of a disguise that he puts on occasionally. And even with this disguise on, he still looks like Cammy. He's so identifiable as Cammy. And as a kid, he was a big Middlesbrough fan as a kid. The Middlesbrough captain turned him down for an autograph when he was little. He'd been waiting for an hour and a half in the rain. The guy had to run off. And he said at that point, he said, if ever I get to the point where I can sign autographs, I'm never not going to sign one for someone. And to this day, he refuses to not sign an autograph if someone asks, even if I'm going spare, going, Cammy, we're going to be late. We've got to start recording. No, I'm going to sign this autograph. Every single person. I promise you, it's like being out with a Hollywood A-lister. It's just lovely. The love for that man is extraordinary.
You must get a lot of public recognition, though. Is that something that you enjoy?
To be honest, I had this conversation with someone yesterday. It's occasionally it can happen, and if it does, usually people are really lovely and very friendly and nice. But I think, I can go about my business. People often expect me to be in a suit and a shirt and tie. I noticed that actually a few weeks ago. I came back on the train and I'd been dressed up for a dinner or something, and I was much more noticeable in a suit and a shirt than I would be if I'm in jeans and a T-shirt. People don't expect to see you like that. And sort of out of context, it's amazing how many people get on the train and go, oh, how are you? Yeah. Did you go to the Christmas party? No, I didn't go to the Christmas party. How was it? Yeah, it was great. Well, so-and-so got really drunk. Then they get off and then they realise that they don't know me from work. They know me off the telly. So you get a little bit of that occasionally. But I wouldn't let it get in the way of what I'm doing. And one of the things I really enjoy is meeting people and speaking to people. So usually, I'd say 99% of the time, people are just absolutely lovely.
Let's talk about Kate.
Yes, let's talk about Kate.
Your on-screen partnership with her, I think, is brilliant in that you clearly really, really get on with each other. And you sort of, each of you have your own little ways. And but I mean, obviously she's been through a terrible time over the past 2 or 3 years, which, I mean, I've talked to her about on my show. You've been a huge support to her, I think, haven't you?
Well, she is one of my best friends. I mean, we've been working together since 2000. It's 22 years now. We've been through everything. We've been through marriages, divorce, births, children, ups, downs, career highs, career lows, career slip-ups, career mistakes, joyous moments, scary moments, and then, perhaps the sort of the hardest of them all is what's happened to Derek through COVID and the fight that family have had ever since, and the fight that she has had ever since. I think she's remarkable. I love working with her, Ian. There's some magic in Kate Garraway that I don't think people really appreciate. She doesn't get the credit for as well a lot of the time. And there's some madness in there, undoubtedly, as well, which drives me right up the bend. But I wouldn't change, because it's, I am better at my job because I work with people like Kate, and I get the chance to work with people like Kate. She certainly makes me want to be better at my job. And the brilliant thing, it's like you and, the chemistry that you and Jackie have found on your podcast. One of the most important things about doing live television is your trust in the person alongside you. That if you drop the ball, they're going to catch it for you. or that if you can see something coming that they perhaps haven't seen because something's changed, it's live, that they can help you out. And, you know, I have that implicit trust that...
That her alarm will go off.
Yeah, the alarm will go off. She'll land me in it at some point, and I'll be catching the ball throughout the whole show.
But the thing is, it's a bit like Cammy as well, that if he does something that broadcasting purists would sort of slightly frown at, what you've always got to remember is that the audience loves it.
Yes, absolutely, because that's real.
Yeah.
That's the bit that's real. The rest of it can feel quite sterile and straight. And if you can be a little bit more real, then you're much more relatable. And I think that's one of the things that I you know, we just have such a laugh. Kate and I have had such a laugh. It's been really difficult for her, and and the documentaries. I'm so proud that the viewers have been drawn to those documentaries, and they have sort of voted for her for the National TV Award. Not for her, but for the voice that she's being able to give to the world of social care, which is absolutely on its knees. I know how important the carers in her life are for her and Derek now, and that she is getting some credit for that. But that just scratches the surface, Iain, of you know, that constant battle she has while she's juggling being a mum, really important to two teenagers, and trying to hold down the professional career as well, because she's got bills to pay, she's got to look after everybody. You know, there's an incredible amount of pressure that she has to deal with. The amount of balls that she's got in the air at any one time is remarkable. I don't know how she does it at times, like genuinely. I have said that to her. I said, I do not know how you get through. She's so present. That's one of the things I think that's magic about her. She's so in the moment. She deals with everything right then, right there. She's brilliant at being that person, and is sort of pretty unique in the world of broadcasting as well.
What haven't you done in broadcasting that you would really like to do?
Cool. I think one of the things that I haven't done, I would love to do more travel. I did a fair bit to start with, but I haven't done much for a while, and I wanted to stop because the boys were at an age where I wanted to be at home. I'd love to do some more travel and go and do a bit of exploring. But there's not a lot of things. I've been lucky enough. I've been so lucky. I've been able to do a number of different things along the way. You know, I don't think I ever really envisaged myself hosting a quiz, and now I've got this quiz that is just the most important part of my life and my family's life. And not a day goes by without someone stopping me on the street to tell me about a story of someone they know that's been on Tipping Point, or a story to do with Tipping Point, or their kids love Tipping Point, or their grandparents love Tipping Point. And I you know, that is to have the opportunity to host a show like that is a real privilege. And then to do the breakfast show, working alongside Susanna through everything after the Queen died. You know, there are moments in broadcasting where, as broadcasters, you want to be involved in those moments because they're the test. That's where you really have to be on your game, because there is a lot of eyes on it, there's a lot of focus, and you want to get it right. Susanna's another person that working with Susanna is like a masterclass. I think she really is brilliant at what she does, and I think I've learned so much from her since we started working together in 2014. But travel had certainly, I've sort of done the sports thing. I do a bit more of sport, but I hosted a great show, a great thing called Rugby X, which was just before pandemic, which was a new version of rugby indoors with fireworks and stuff like that.
I've never really got rugby.
Oh, I'll have to take you to Twickenham, Iain.
No, I have been to Twickenham, probably back, when was it? Would it have been in the 1990s, a couple of times. And I've never heard the national anthem sung like it. It's just amazing. But I think I annoyed all my friends because they would have this sort of rugby lads weekend, and sort of I'd go along, not really fitting in. And I would just sort of keep nudging and saying, why did you do that?
Yeah.
What's the rule there? Because I did play it at school, but I didn't like it.
The rules are super complicated. Don't get me wrong. I totally agree that the rules can be super complicated if you're coming to it without any idea. But the thing that they have now, I'm not sure they had then, is they have RefLink now, so you can hear what the ref's saying, which is what an amazing thing. I mean, they're so far advanced of the world of football, by the way, being able to hear what the refs, I mean, we can go on about that for ages. But so you can hear why the ref's making that decision, and that really helps you understand what's going on if you're not a rugby sort of aficionado. But I just, you know, being part of those moments, being part of those big events, that would be, so a bit more travel if I could, a bit more exploration around the world, meeting people. And, you know, that's the other thing, is I've sort of, like a Wicker's World, that sort of thing. Do you remember you used to go off and meet extraordinary people around the world who were doing crazy things? I'd love to do a bit of that. There's lots of people out there doing mad, crazy, brilliant things that that are sort of so alien to us, to go and understand them. A mixture of people and travel, that wouldn't be bad.
Ben Shephard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Ben's book is called Humble Heroes, Inspirational Stories of Hope, Heart and Humanity. I suppose this is the ultimate sales pitch. It is a great Christmas present book, isn't it? Particularly, I think, if somebody's maybe going through a difficult time and they want to be inspired and maybe moved, it's a great present for them.
I totally agree. Obviously, I'm going to agree. But I totally agree. I think the thing about it, Ian, if I can just... it's the shot in the arm we need right now, because it's a bit bleak at times. And you just have to dip in and out of it. Lots of short stories and maybe a bit of inspiration. Everybody in this book, whatever they have done, have said without fail, they get more from doing it than they have to commit to actually do it. And there's some amazing stories, an idea that maybe someone will read the book and go, or maybe I'll go and look at my local volunteer centre, or maybe I'll look at that charity, or I'll try and do something. Because that sense of purpose and self-worth that the people in the book get from what they've done is absolutely priceless.
Ben, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ian.
Join us again next week for another edition of the Iain Dale All Talk podcast. Goodbye.